All right, hello, welcome. My name is Shaina. I'm an astrologer, and today we are talking about a very, very special, very well-known, somewhat of a cult case. We're talking today about the JONBENET Ramsey case. And today is actually my fourth installment of this true crime astrology series. I've done 3 prior. You can click the card up here if you're interested in the other ones. If you're wondering what this series is, I basically take a famous true crime case. It can be unsolved, solved, it doesn't matter. The only thing that does matter is that the person needs an AA or A rating that we're focusing on so that I can talk about them and feel like good. And you know, if you're an astrologer or at all into astrology, I'm sure you relate. I'm sure you've done this before, where you're watching a documentary, TV show, whatever it might be, and you look up the person's chart to try to, like, you know, interpret those two things together. So I do that all the time. I do that with fucking everything I watch. And I especially have always done that with true crime cases. So that's what I'm doing today. I'm breaking down JONBENET Ramsey's case, but more than that, I'm also breaking down her chart. Now, because of the way her case is, I'll also be breaking down her dad's chart, her mom's chart, and her brother Burke's chart. So we have a lot of charts coming into play today. So if you want your chart dissected, like I dissected these people's, you can get that, right? You can do that on my website, shainaemily.com. I offer birth chart readings, tarot readings, a bunch of other stuff there. My voice is not completely back, okay? I would say it's like 80 to 85% back, but I put off this video last week. I'm annoyed over putting it off and I want to do it this week. So I'm impatient, so I'm doing it today. So if you know absolutely nothing about the JONBENET Ramsey case, first of all, where have you been? Second of all, okay, that's fine, I'll tell you. So basically, the JONBENET Ramsey case is one of the most prolific unsolved mysteries, just period. Maybe just in the United States, but I'd say for the most part, it's just period, one of the most, if not the most well-known. JONBENET Ramsey was an American child beauty queen who was killed at the young age of 6 in her family home on Christmas night in 1996, and it is still considered a cold case. So obviously one of the biggest reasons that this case is so infamous is because it's unsolved and it's so confusing. But another reason why this case is so infamous, I think, is because everybody fell in love with JONBENET Ramsey, the little girl. She's 6, she was a pageant queen, she won some tiaras, she did a lot of performances. We have some videos of that, and it's really easy to fall in love with her, right? Even though this case is considered a cold case, and the point of this video isn't necessarily, you know, me trying to solve it or anything, but I have always had my own theory for this case. Not necessarily exactly what happened, but I feel like it's very blatantly obvious the themes of what happened, right? Now, I will say, it's not only mine. I'm probably right, so of course some people are going to agree with me. So I have seen some stuff online kind of supporting my theory. So obviously I wanted to dress like the video, so I put on my best little pageant garb, pageant gear, right? I actually do have a tiara, but I'm not that corny. Last thing before we jump into the case, let's go over the birth charts that we'll be focusing on. So first off, we have JONBENET Ramsey. She has an A rating on her chart, and she was born August 6th, 1990 at 1:36 a.m. in Atlanta, Georgia. And next up, we have JONBENET Ramsey. Yes, JONBENET was named after John Bennett, which I'll get into the astrology of that in a second. I can't believe it, but JONBENET's chart actually has an AA rating. It is so rare to find like a supporting character that has an AA rating. So that's really cool. We're going to use his birth chart. His birthday is December 7th, 1943, 12:45 a.m. in Omaha, Nebraska. The last player we have is Patsy Ramsey. Now they do have her rising online, but I'm pretty sure it's like a D rating, so we are not going to pay attention to her rising sign. That's just to be noted. However, her birthday is December 29th, 1956 at Parkersburg, West Virginia, roughly around 2 p.m. And then the last main player that we have, no rising or nothing at all, even close is released, we'll just be using his planetary placements, and that's Burke, their son. He was 9 at the time, and he was born on January 27th, 1987 in Atlanta, Georgia. And now, enough chatting, let's just get into it. So let's start with JONBENET Ramsey. He is your classic businessman. You know, this murder happened in 1996, so this is very much like classic American bougie man, right? He was the president of Access Graphics at the time, which is a computer company software, and it later turned into something called Lockheed Martin. I think that's like a name, right? He has a lot of money. In fact, in 1996, the year that this crime took place, Access Graphics grossed over $1 billion that year, and Ramsey himself was named Entrepreneur of the Year. First of all, let's just take a look at his chart and let's take a look at money. Like, let's take a look at the fact that he's got a bunch of money, he's rich, he's in with the bigwigs, he's got a lot of connections, he knows about a lot of stuff we don't. So the first thing that I'll say about his chart that I see is obviously he's a Virgo rising. That's so easy. He's a businessman, he's proper, he's put in his place. However, he's also a Christian. Virgo rising, Neptune in the first house. I see this a lot with boomer Christian American businessmen because they're both religious, but it's like in Libra, so it's like appropriate. It's like more of a community or societal religion with that Neptune in Libra and then in the first house. So he wants to come across very just professional, and he wants to come across very appropriate. He's probably not super talkative. He's probably not super extroverted when you first meet him. He's probably almost very shrewd and calculated. He's probably pretty off-putting to most people when you first meet him. And again, this makes a lot of sense with him being a businessman. Because even though he is a Virgo rising, it is badly aspected. So there is some sense of, I think every businessman who it's like they just put on that face, but in reality, they're just like kind of a little bit of a sporadic mess, kind of like don't think things out as fully. You know, he may come across like he does, but he might actually act a little bit more on impulse than you think. And I'm saying that because of his Sun in Sagittarius in the fourth house. I mean, along with his Mercury in Sagittarius in the fourth house, which is squaring his rising, and the fact that if you look above here, he's got some stuff squaring it in Gemini in his 10th house, right? So he's not all what he seems. So in his 10th house, that's a big part of, you know, this whole businessman thing. He's got it in Gemini, probably a salesperson, which makes sense. You know, Mars and Saturn in there, he wants to be the head of something. He wants to be the commander of something. He will never take no for an answer. He has Saturn in the 10th house. He's really determined to make a name and a career and a businessman out of himself. I would also like to reiterate his 10th house, his 10th house Gemini planets, especially Mars in Gemini in the 10th house, Uranus in Gemini conjunct it. These are really sketchy back and forth. Oof. Mars and Gemini. Ooh. So like shady business deals, sketchy business deals, sketchy talking, sketchy ramblings, two-faced, leading a double life, being appropriate on one hand, not on the other. Angel over here, devil over here. Sketchy, sketchy, sketchy. And then if you're looking at the 11th house, this definitely, what should I say, supports what I said of like he probably knows some kind of underground society or is in some kind of sketchy ring or is involved with something a little bit more nefarious. And that's the fact that he has two really extreme planets in his 11th house. He has his Pluto in Leo and his Lilith in Leo, both conjunct in the 11th house. So this is just somebody that's associated with less than, I guess, above board groups and people and you know, meetings and clubs, like sketchier. They're out for blood. They're out for themselves. They're out for their own accreditation. They're out to, and this is him too. He has this energy in himself. So he's also out to be the best, to be the top, to get the most acclaim, to be the most influenceable, and also just running with the wrong people a lot of times. I think of with this 11th house. So you might be wondering why I'm focusing so much on this and it, you know, this whole like, oh, the people he runs with kind of stuff, because I think it does have to do with my theory, which will come into play later on. Oh my God, this is also so obvious, but Venus and Libra in the second house and he's really rich and he loves money. First marriage, he actually did get married before Patsy Ramsey, and it ended in divorce in 1978. They actually had 3 children. What's also really, I guess, surprising is that JONBENET was not his first child to have died at a young age. He actually had a daughter that died in her, I want to say very early 20s. I might be wrong, like 22, I think around there. And she died supposedly of a car crash. So already that's not sketchy in itself, but that is a little interesting and a little odd. I don't know what happened in the car crash, but there's not really much information, which is also really weird. I mean, if we look at his birth chart, like, is there something sketchy in him? I mean, he has, it's a Virgo rising, no, I'm just kidding. He has those sketchy 10th and 11th houses for sure, but that just kind of points to his job and his work and the people that he hangs with being sketchy. Now, he does have moon in the 8th house, and especially with it being in Aries, it's a little aggressive. This can be a little bit of an immediate red flag because this is somebody that has something in them that can explode, that can get really emotionally upset and be really emotionally aggressive. However, with the 8th house, it is kind of hard to interpret 8th house moons because sometimes they can also be people who really suppress and really hide their emotions. Sometimes it's people that it's just like, oh my God, all they do is let it out and it's like endless and it's like they can never let it out enough. But I think with how his chart translates and the rest of him, he probably does still hide a lot of his feelings. It's not probably in its innate natural thing to show them. The 8th house is very secretive and very private. Also, as we know, the 8th house has to do with things like death and murder and losing a kid or, extremely traumatizing, really depressing, really harsh events. So his moon is in there. The moon has to do with femininity. So it makes sense that his moon is in the 8th house and he has lost these 2 feminine children. It is opposite his Venus. Did he have a lot of trouble with his own femininity and because of this moon opposite Venus? And did he have trouble accepting his own feminine sides that he projected dislike and distaste onto his feminine children? Like, is this true? Potentially, with the rest of his chart, it could potentially be, and that could potentially be a piece of the puzzle. Also, moon in the 8th house does also make sense with multiple marriages as well, especially opposite Venus. So in 1980, only 2 years after he divorced his previous wife, he married Patsy. And then because the business was booming, it was doing so well, they were currently living in Atlanta, Georgia at the time with their 2 kids. So in 1991, they moved to Boulder, Colorado, where the company's headquarters was located. This was very different for them, by the way. They were used to a very bougie upper class neighborhood and environment, and this was a little bit more townsy. So they were already out of place, already felt a little bit weird in the environment. JONBENET RAMSEY is somebody that, has a lot of money. He has a concentration of planets from his 8th to his 12th house. Yes, he does have planets from his 1st to his 4th. He wasn't only, a businessman. That wasn't his only role. He was very much a father, very much a husband. That was a big key player. So it does make sense that he has something in the 2nd house to earn money and planets in the 4th house because him being a father was a focal point. So now let's talk about Patsy Ramsey. We know honestly what I feel like is very little about Patsy Ramsey. Like, I feel like we know almost nothing. All we really know about Patsy Ramsey is that she once won an American beauty pageant. At the age of 20, she was Miss West Virginia in 1977. I guess that's the only pageant she won, because that's the only one that's mentioned, and I'm sure if she won more, she'd fucking mention it, you know what I mean? So I don't know. So she obviously has somewhat of a pageant background. So it does make sense that JONBENET Ramsey was in pageantry as a young kid. Now, we don't know her exact, birth time, as I mentioned. She's basically Capricorn and fire, right? So very headstrong. Also, I think of somebody that really is like, this is what I want. I'm going to get it. I'm going to go after it and nobody can tell me otherwise. Very lucky, very fortunate with that Sagittarius energy. A lot of opportunities, a lot of expansiveness in her life, but she still is a Capricorn sun, a Capricorn Mercury. There still were some trials and tribulations. There still was some hardship to deal with. Definitely also has some emotional stunting like JONBENET does, because she's just a female Capricorn. And also, Sagittarius moon isn't the most intuitive placement. It's not the most unintuitive, but it's also not the most like cliche emotional feminine energy either by far. She definitely has what seems like a little bit more of masculine energy to her. I think that JONBENET, actually with his sun in this 4th house, I think he makes really what are sometimes irrational and unprepared decisions. And then I think Patsy comes in and like secretly tries to manage things behind the scenes maybe, but it can just sometimes be as scatterbrained and as out of touch as him. I think both of these people are very, very much out of touch. They both have Sagittarius energy that does run within both of them. There's obvious immediate agreements right there. Virgo rising, Capricorn sun, Aries moon, Aries Mars. So there's a lot of similar themes within these 2 people's charts. And so there's just a lot of what I think of as like getting what you want, making sure that you get what you want, that you get the best, and that you get what you want out of it. That's kind of how I'm reading their charts and their relationship right now. Basically, Patsy and John moved to Boulder, Colorado a few years ago. They have 2 kids, an older brother named Burke and a younger daughter named JONBENET. So let's get into the story before the crime. As I mentioned, JONBENET was a little pageant princess, okay? Before any of this happened, she had been entered into a series of child beauty pageants, and she has been performing from a very, very young age. So let's take a little peek at her chart. So very, very predictable. I guessed this, if I'm being honest with you. She's a Gemini rising. I can't see anything else for this little kid, and especially at 0 degrees. So the fact that she was, you know, murdered at age 6, she was immortalized to be a young kid. She will never grow past the age of 6. We will always see her as a little girl. What's more little girl than a 0 degree Gemini rising, right? Cute, sweet, funny, smart, inquisitive, curious, you know, that makes sense. Big makeup, big hair, cutesy, you know, playing to her age very much, especially even though she was younger and you think, well, she's wearing all this makeup and all this stuff, blah, 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 blah. Very Gemini, very double life, but also it's like Gemini likes to have fun. Gemini likes to play. She has a very pure Gemini rising. And what I mean by that is it's just sextile Jupiter. So it's just like, she has a big first impression. There's nothing really stopping this rising from expressing itself. There's nothing from stopping this little girl from expressing herself. She's very captivating. Even as a little 6-year-old, there felt like there was something special with her because there kind of was. Her Jupiter was in the 3rd house. She did pageants. She performed at pageants. She did little beauty queen things, right? Very little 3rd house, like a little community star, right? And then if you look at her sun is in Leo in the 4th house, as is her Mercury in Virgo in the 4th house. I think this is really interesting because, as I said, a lot of people are named Junior or this and that really does show up in the birth chart. So JONBENET was named after John Bennett, her father, and John Bennett has his Sagittarius sun and Mercury in the 4th house. And what is JONBENET's 4th house but sun also in a fire sign in Leo in the 4th house, which the sun's the father. The father has a huge impact on the child when they have a 4th house sun. You know, she was also very much the little star of the home. Not only was she a star when she went out, you know, and did these beauty pageants, but also when she came home, she was the star. I would say she would probably be the favorite. She would be the prized possession, but it probably felt like that. She was the prized possession, okay? This is not a well-aspected sun, so she had a really strong fatherly influence. Her father was there and, you know, made a huge impact on her life, but was it for the better? I mean, look at how that thing's aspected. It's square to malefics. It's part of a grand cross. It's opposite her moon. This is not a good relationship with the father. I mean, I don't know, obviously, the intricacies of this stuff because we weren't there. I think she really took to her mom, which is, you know, moon in the 9th house conjunct the midheaven. It's still badly aspected. It's still just as poorly aspected as her sun. That almost makes me think, I don't know if she actually, maybe she didn't have a good relationship with either of her parents. I feel like that's just the theme of both of her parents. It's like love and affection and being special. Like, you're special, yes, but all that comes with a price. All that comes with something heavy and something karmic that you have to take on and deal with. Now, if you haven't noticed this yet, I'm going to point this out to you now. If you've watched my last video, my last true crime astrology video, I did it on Gypsy Rose Blanchard. Gypsy Rose Blanchard, she's a Libra rising, so trine, Gemini, similar air sign rising, right? And then she is also a Leo sun, Aquarius moon, and she was also somebody who was in a really, well, I think, I'm going to be honest, you know, my theory states that they were both in a very abusive family environment. This full moon thing is a big theme, and then this Leo Aquarius thing, I guess, is a big theme as far as it's like hyper overprotective parents that aren't protecting you. They're protecting them and their livelihood. Like, they're making your childhood about them and protecting them and making them happy, making them look good, rather than it being about the child and doing that for the child. That, I think, is the theme of both of these children's charts. And then as far as pageantry goes, Leo sun in the 4th house makes sense with pageantry. I don't have to explain that to you. This person's gonna love dressing up. This kid's just gonna have a lot of entertainment themed things around their life from a very young age, right? They have to be proper and respectable as well. Very Leo, very aware of how they come across. Another thing that makes a lot of sense with this pageantry, I think, is Venus in Cancer in the 3rd house. Now, I really like Venus in Cancer. I think it's a beautiful placement in a lot of ways. However, I say that from afar because I think when people actually experience Venus in Cancer, I think they have a lot of confidence issues. And I'm only saying that just off of what I've just noticed in people or celebrities, that these are always the people that really have these, I just want to call it like surface level confidence issues. It doesn't mean that they're not pretty. It doesn't mean that they're not this or they're not loved. I don't know. It's like it's Cancer. It just wants a lot of love. It wants a lot of affection. It wants pure love. It wants pure affection. It wants to be beautiful. It wants to be feminine. It wants to be loved. It wants to be nurtured. It wants to be adored. It wants to be well taken care of. It wants to be protected. All that sort of stuff. So it's just kind of hard in this day and age, in this life in general, to kind of experience those things a lot of times. So I think that's why a lot of times there's hurt that comes from Venus in Cancer. I think this relates to pageantry because Venus in the 3rd house, I think, obviously relates to pageantry. She was really young. 3rd house, she was a kid. 3rd house, she was doing something that had to do with Venus. You dressed up, you got pretty, you talked in a pleasant way. Venus, right? This is honestly a very wounded Venus. This is a little girl who from a young age was in competitions, put against other people, not really given as much love as she felt like she deserved, or never fully being able to reap the rewards of how beautiful she was. There's some stunting of confidence there, I think, which makes sense with pageantry. It's like you get so much confidence and there's so much of a pressure to be put on you that it just kind of stagnates it and it stops it. And no matter what, there are always little 5-year-olds or 6-year-olds that are prettier than you. And that's probably how she felt with this Venus opposite Saturn and this Venus opposite Neptune. It's like she was given unconditional love, but it feels much more in a maybe like religious way, or like they didn't really know her. They just loved the idea of her. I think that would have been a major theme if she got older, like that people would have loved the idea of her more than they liked her, which makes sense because we all love JONBENET Ramsey, but we don't even know who the fuck she is. Like, let's be real. We don't know anything about really her personality, anything really about what she was like, anything really about what she did. They never really talk about what their kid was like. Very 4th house sun, right? We know her for this moon, Aquarius moon. It's like a cult-like thing. Aquarius midheaven, Aquarius moon. This is a cult true crime case. That's what she is known for. What she's not known for is just being JONBENET, the kid. Leo sun in the 4th house. Also back to that Venus, it's conjunct Chiron. She was very beautiful. She was very loved. She was very adored. But that was also, I think, her downfall. That was also her Achilles heel. That was also, unfortunately, what put her in the position to be so heavily wounded time and time again. So as I mentioned, they were rich. They were enjoying the glamorous life in Boulder, Colorado. She's got that 3rd house, 4th house concentration where their home was really big, extravagant. Their family was a huge part of their life. But then she's got this concentration of a lot more public situations between the 8th and the 9th house. However, with all that stuff in the 8th house and close to the 8th house and in the 6th and 12th house, this displays a lot of secrets, a lot of things that are very hidden and mysterious about her life. Also, the 8th house does equal wealth. It equals generational wealth. It equals familiar wealth. So the hard thing that I'm not going to talk too much about this right now, but I want to make a note is that during this time, Patsy is dealing with ovarian cancer. My mom actually passed from ovarian cancer. I'm not going to talk about that right now, but that is something to note later on, was that she was already dealing with these ovarian issues. Another thing that a lot of people noted is that she had a performance only days before the crime happened on Christmas in a shopping mall. So what I'm trying to say is, she was out performing before she passed. People were seeing her. She was in the public eye, very moon in the 9th house, conjunct midheaven. She was known in the community. There was a lot of chances for people to see her. And in fact, not just this, they actually, because the Ramseys were so wealthy and they just did wealthy people things, which I guess is having a really big Christmas party and going to a bunch of Christmas parties and having a bunch of people over. And of course, since they have 2 people with 4th house suns, at least 2 people with 4th house suns here, they're gonna host their own Christmas party. So many people, they said around 1,500, which is insane, 11th house Pluto Lilith, John Bennett knows a lot of motherfuckers, okay? 1,500 people passed in and out their house during the Christmas season. And the day before Christmas, they went to a huge Christmas party right before this happened. I'm just trying to set the scene for my theory here. We've got two little kids, two little rich kids, right? This is going to get very explicit, this video, and I'm going to be very open and honest, but like, they seem ripe for child predators. And the fact that the Ramseys are letting all these people in and out of their house, going to all these Christmas parties, obviously there's a lot of older men involved, okay? These are businessmen parties. These are all old fucking weirdo rich businessmen with so much money that they don't really know what to do with, going to different Christmas parties and going to specifically the Ramseys' Christmas parties and seeing this little 6-year-old pageant princess. And then the next day she gets murdered. Something has to do with these two things. You know, if you look at a lot of the JONBENET stuff, we treat this as like a isolated incident. John Bennett is hungry for money. He's hungry for power. He is somebody with a bunch of planets concentrated on the way that people view him, how people see him, the wealth he has, the house he has to invite people over for, the assets he has. You know, what his wife and kids look like is an asset, right? Is kind of how I'm seeing it. Patsy is having this really bad issue with her ovaries. She has ovarian cancer. And listen, I can say whatever the fuck I want about ovarian cancer. My mom died of ovarian cancer. If there's anything I can fucking talk about, it's this. So she's going through some issues. She's having some, you know, obviously some problems that are manifesting as ovarian cancer. That's what I believe. I know that people will get really upset sometimes online if you say like, you know, that illnesses are connected to spiritual, mental, or emotional things. But I think they are. Then there's John Bennett, who only cares right now about getting his name out there, getting more famous, you know, gaining more money, being a better businessman, climbing up the ranks, getting to know more powerful people. You know, that's his number one top priority. I'll just tell you what my theory is. I think that basically John Bennett was pimping out his daughter, JONBENET, to these other businessmen, you know, or whoever these rich people are that he has over at his Christmas party and that he's a part of. I think that, you know, he was a part of a child SA ring. Maybe he was manipulated a little bit into it. Whatever it was, it doesn't matter. I think he is mostly responsible for putting her in this situation. And I actually also think that Burke was a part of this too. I think Burke was a part of this child SA ring. At first, I thought that it was more of an exchange with the heads of the people of the pageant. I thought, you know, maybe Patsy and John Bennett wanted JONBENET to win so badly that they would basically bribe the judges of the pageant and say, hey, you can sexually assault my child in exchange for us winning first place or her winning the crown, you know, when it gets picked. That's what I thought it was for. Now I'm like, I still think that that could be a possibility. Now I think it's more John Bennett using his children to get himself ahead in the business world because of that Pluto and Lilith in the 11th house and then that moon in the 8th house. With his bad association with women and females, it makes sense that he could be somebody that could conduct a lot of negativity and a lot of harmful sexual stuff having to do with females, especially because of the fact that his Venus is in Libra, female, in the 2nd house. He earns money through the beautiful females around him. And then his moon is in Aries in the 8th house. He himself is a man and masculine, so he gets to stay out of this. He doesn't have to be a part of this sexual abuse. He just gets to benefit and earn the money from it. And then I think that Patsy had, I mean, if I'm just being straight up, I know, again, you can't really say this stuff, but I think that Patsy Ramsey had ovarian cancer as a manifestation of how guilty she felt for letting her daughter and her son get molested. I think that was a literal representation of her guilt. So that's what I think. And I haven't even gone to the crime. And why I think that's backed up in JONBENET's chart, it's because, duh, she has 6th house Pluto intercepted in Scorpio and Lilith in there intercepted. Power was taken away from her every day. She had to go through these terrible, terrible experiences, sexual experiences with Scorpio every day. She had no say. She didn't get the choice. It's square her sun, square her moon. Her parents betrayed her. Her parents did this to her. This caused her a lot of pain. Her Pluto square, her sun and moon, her parents, they're fucking evil. They're fucking mean. They're fucking cruel. They're up to nefarious things. They're not to be trusted. Like, let's just be straight and read it how it is, right? Mars in Taurus in the 12th house. You don't get to defend yourself. You're too young. You're too little. You just have to sit there and take it. Literally, that's Mars intercepted in the 12th house. Like, you're so little, you can't fight back. You can't say anything. You may feel a certain way, but you just have to lay there and deal with it. Your Mars is intercepted in the 12th house. Again, she has all this 8th house stuff, which adds to the mystery, adds to this, like, these weird experiences that nobody else understands or were a part of, that only happen behind closed doors, right? You know, she has her own personality. She's this Leo Sun Aquarius moon, but it's square the Mars and the Pluto. It's not aligned with the fact that she has all of this abuse, and her personality is mostly a result of the abuse. That's what I think. All right, finally, we're at the crime. Let's just go over quickly what they claimed, what John and Patsy Ramsey claimed happened. John claims that they came home from a Christmas event that night. Basically, she was tired. She was sleeping in the car. She was hunched over. You know, Burke saw her sleeping in the car. And when they got home, John, you know, picked her up and he took her to bed, took her upstairs, laid her in a room, and they said goodnight to her. That is what they claim as being the last time they see JONBENET. Now, this Christmas party that they went to, the list of people that attended that party is nowhere to be found. They've never released it. They never talk about it. They never bring it up. And it's like, what? That's your first list of suspects, right? If it's true, first of all, is it true that they came from a Christmas party? Did we get that verified? Second of all, if that's true and she was murdered right after that, probably has to do with somebody at the Christmas event. Probably has to do with something that happened at the Christmas event. Probably those two things are interconnected. Is there much information on this event? Absolutely not. There's like no information on this event. I look back at JONBENET's sketchy ass 10th house, sketchy ass 11th house, sketchy ass 8th house, subtly sketchy 2nd house. You know, it seems pretty and nice, but what's really going on? Who are these people that he's around? And the fact that they don't release the list makes it feel like, to me, that the police or just the government or whoever is protecting the people at that party. Because what kind of party was it, right? Basically, then they claim that they fell asleep and woke up the next morning. They came home at like midnight, fell asleep around 2, woke up at 5 a.m. the next morning. Now, neighbors say that there was a noise at 2 a.m. So middle of the night when supposedly John, Patsy, JONBENET, and Burke are all sleeping. There's a scream. A light's on in the kitchen, and they keep hearing a little girl scream. Now, obviously, this is speculative to that this is when the murder happened. John, Patsy, Burke all claim they heard no noise. They claim that, long night's rest. Patsy wakes up. She brushes her teeth. She gets ready for the day. It's about 5:30 a.m., which, first of all, that's kind of weird that you went to sleep at like between 12 and 2, and then you woke up at 5 a.m. I mean, I guess if you have work the next day, but it's also the day after Christmas. Maybe that's just on the schedule that she's on, but it's just weird to say that she woke up so soon after this Christmas party where you think they'd be exhausted. Patsy Ramsey claims that she walked down the stairs, and on the 3rd stair, there's this note. And she picks up and she reads this note, and she quickly realizes that it's a ransom letter. And it's saying that we have kidnapped JONBENET. She's taken, and that's when she drops it, she screams, and John hears and comes running. That's how the Ramseys claim that they heard about the kidnapping of JONBENET. They claim that Burke was asleep this whole time. Burke had no idea what happened. Burke did not hear her scream. Burke did not hear the scream the night before. At 5:52 a.m., Patsy Ramsey calls the police. She's saying they have my daughter, all this sort of stuff. But then what's also interesting is that after Patsy called the police, she then called a bunch of family and friends and told all of them. So this immediately, she's bringing all these people into it immediately. And I'll go over what the ransom note said in a second because that was a big part of it as well. So initially, this was a kidnapping case. When they went to JONBENET's room, she was gone. She was not there. The note said that she was kidnapped and they were going to slice her head off if they didn't give them money. Basically, 2 police officers arrived within minutes and they conducted a search of the house. They did not see any sign of forced entry. They were looking everywhere for where the intruder that kidnapped, or the intruders that kidnapped JonBenet, they were looking everywhere to try to figure out where they would have come in, how they would have come in. You know, there's even one point where they go down to the basement and they see this locked and bolted door. They claim that the police officer goes, well, it's not like that, you know, a person could come in through this bolted door from outside. There's no way there's any windows or anything in this room at all. There's no reason to search it. So the police came and searched the house, but they did not search the basement, which already is sketchy. Already I'm like, how much are the police involved in this? Why wouldn't they search the whole house? If a door was closed, wouldn't they open it? So with JonBenet missing, JonBenet made arrangements to pay the kidnappers, and a forensics team was dispatched to the house. And because this was thought of as a kidnapping case, only JonBenet's room was sanctioned off. So you could go in the rest of the house. In fact, people did go in the rest of the house. She had friends over, family over. Hell, why not have another fucking after Christmas party, post-child kidnapping little howdy-doody party at my fucking contaminated, evidence-ridden house? They thought, this is a great time to clean the kitchen. This is a great time to clean the house. This is a great time to walk through the house and touch everything and move stuff. That's what they did. They literally cleaned the house for Patsy. Doesn't it sound like these people are in on something? Maybe they're trying to cover something up too. Maybe they're trying to cover up for a friend. It's weird that nobody once said, hey, maybe we shouldn't clean up because this might mess and tamper with some of the evidence and you might not get your kid back. They don't really seem that concerned with getting their kid back. They just seemed really concerned about having a clean house. Now, you'd think this was 1754 with the way that this investigation was worked out and there was no such thing as forensics and DNA. So I really think that the police had something to do with the fact that this evidence was so contaminated and that this was so messed up. Please remember that these are really rich people. These are really, really, really prominent people in the community. They would know police officers, or at least they could know police officers. They could have connections to police. You know, people like to go on here and say, God, the police are just so incompetent. It's so frustrating when they did this case that how much they missed. Maybe they meant to. I am under the impersonation that they meant to, that this was purposeful, and they knew they were contaminating the case. So basically, they're waiting and they're waiting to give the money to this kidnapping person. Surprise, surprise. The person never shows up. They never get a phone call. They never get another note. They get no further instructions from this ransom note writer. JonBenet has actually left the house for like an hour or so and supposedly gone to go get the mail and come back. We don't know what he did for that hour or so. We just know that he left the house unsupervised. What he did,
I guess we'll never know.
Why was there not some sort of investigator going with him, right? The people have been here since 6 a.m. At 1 p.m., finally, they're like, yeah, nobody's coming for the money, okay? Something's up. We're gonna search the house again, which is crazy that, again, it took them that long. And for some reason, the people that they choose to search the house are not officers, are not investigators, are not detectives. They're John. It's John. They pick John himself and John's best friend to go search the house again, which is insane. It's absolutely insane. It's almost like this was set up, right? So we also don't know who John's friend is, what part he played, what role he played. It's like, why don't we care about these people? Why aren't we wanting to know more? They look again. They look. They go, where should we start? Oh, I know, we should start in the basement. You know that place, that locked door that detective was like, they can't come in through the locked door. Let's check that room first. So they did. And what's crazy is all of a sudden there was a body there. Wow. In the door that they didn't check, supposedly, there was JonBenet's dead body. Already sketchy. There was no detective, officer, or investigator around at the time, and he was very strictly instructed to not touch the body if he comes in contact with it, right? Or any evidence, do not contaminate it and call us down, call us over, and we'll deal with it. So of course, the first thing he did was pick up the body and tamper with it. He, I think, even like took something off of her that had been put on her, and then picked her up, and he took her upstairs upstairs and brought her into the living room. So here is the state that they found the body. And I don't want to get any of this wrong, so I'm looking. So her mouth was covered with duct tape. A nylon cord was found around her wrists and neck, and her torso was covered by a white blanket. All this stuff was obviously later found in forensics, but let me just go through kind of what the state of her body was. So she had sustained a broken skull from an 8.5-inch impact blow to the head. She had been strangled. A garrote, which is like a wire cord tied to strangle somebody, was found around her neck. Rope that was not from the Ramseys' house was found, so there's some sort of outside player here. Spots of blood were found on JONBENET's long johns and underwear, and she has sustained chronic and acute injuries to her genitalia. Pediatricians looked at her body, and she had very, very obviously been sexually assaulted many times prior. Before this. Basically, they said that at age 7, her hymen was not there, and she was not like the size that a 7-year-old untouched person would be, is what reports had said. People have made up excuses for it, saying that she was just being abused because she was a bad bedwetter. I just don't see that being as a thing. I think that's just them trying to cover it up. And even if you ask Patsy, like there's an interview that I saw with Patsy and John Ramsey, and they both agreed that she didn't have a bedwetting problem that was any more different than any other little kid, and that it had not been a problem in the house, and that it just wasn't a thing. And it just doesn't seem like it's a thing. I don't understand how a kid wetting the bed so much could cause such, you know, like mutilation to her, you know? Also, it was noted that she was undressed and then redressed. So again, this is very aligned with being sexually assaulted. Something even more graphic is that paintbrush endings were found in JONBENET's private parts, and the evidence actually suggests that both the paintbrush and the garrote had been used for sexual assault. It also appears that her vaginal area had been wiped with a cloth. My best guess is that's to erase evidence, to erase DNA evidence. Many specialists that were picked by the police and the jury and everything, they got together and they consulted, and they all agreed that she had sustained a serious injury to her hymen several days prior to her death. These injuries had actually altered the structure of her hymen so much, and it only had healed the night prior to everything that had happened. And all of this was proven in a court of law. I feel like that is so rarely talked about. Dr. Robert Kirshner states, and I quote, "The vaginal opening was twice the size for normal 6-year-olds. The genital injuries indicate penetration. If they had taken her to a hospital emergency room the night that it happened, the family would have been arrested." And I think that when they sit there, both JONBENET and Patsy say we did not murder our daughter, I do think they're telling the truth. I don't think they murdered their daughter. I just think that they covered it up. I think they were the reason for it. They put her in this abusive situation, and then they covered it up to protect themselves and to protect everybody else in their community that's wealthy and rich and in the police and big names. And I think they did all this to cover it up and to cover their ass. The autopsy report officially stated that the cause of death was asphyxia by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma. Basically, a big bash to the head. So she was alive while she was being strangled. So she was strangled first, and then she was hit over the head. So I almost think that the hit over the head, I'm like, was that to distract from all the other horrible abuse that she had just went through? I hate to say it, but that's very Pluto in the 6th house, Mars in the 12th house, 8th house planets. So they found her body. Her death was ruled a homicide. They did not find the body until about 7 hours after she had been reported missing in the basement. And now you may be thinking, well, where is Burke in all this? How does Burke come up in all this? So the Ramseys have always claimed that Burke slept through the entire night until he was awakened several hours after the police arrived. They claimed that he was not awake during the night to hear anything happen. They claim that he was not there when the police first got there. They claim that when they saw the note and they called the police, he was still asleep and they didn't tell him. And they claim it wasn't until they actually walked in the room and woke him up that he knew about the whole situation. Like, I just think that's obviously a lie. Now, a lot of people think that Burke did it. And a lot of people think that Burke did it because he's awkward, uncomfortable, and weird. Now, if you look at his chart, this is the chart of somebody that's awkward, uncomfortable, and weird. Now, do I think that makes him guilty? Absolutely fucking not. Okay, I am somebody that's autistic. You know, I'm a Capricorn moon, I'm a Sagittarius Venus, and I could say if there's something I know about myself, it's that I respond differently emotionally to almost everyone else, to like society's expectation of emotional response. I was like, if he's a Capricorn moon, like, I just feel like he is, first of all, and if he is, then that's confirmation that he just doesn't know how to handle this emotionally, right? And he is. And not only that, on top of it, he's also an Aquarius sun, Aquarius Mercury, so I just don't think he has a natural knack for just like handling himself in a society, you know, appropriate, weird, offbeat situation, you know. And we don't even know his rising, which probably adds to it more, but already just by his chart placements, like, he's gonna react weird. Like, you're gonna be off put by this person. Like, it just is what it is, you know. Also, I think that a lot of his responses and how he acted towards things in the situation, and the fact that he was so sheltered from the investigation, he was sheltered from the police, he was sheltered from questioning, he was sheltered from the media, he was just kind of, they just tried to hide him. I think that even further emphasizes the fact that he also was a part of this ring and that he also was a victim to it. Like, if my theory is true and you're John and Patsy Ramsey, well, of course you're not gonna let your son, who's a part of this, you know, talk to the media. He dealt at a young age with such a big crime that was so public, that also probably stunted his kind of mental ability to grow. Mercury square Pluto, it makes a lot of sense. He kind of had to hide the things he was allowed to say. He wasn't allowed to say all that he wanted to say. Maybe they had to blackmail him somehow. Like, we don't know, you know. I think that the fact that, you know, he responded in the way that he did and everyone responds to the way that they do to him makes sense, because he's just this awkward kid that went through this like really traumatic experience from a very young age, and it just kept on getting more traumatic as he got older, and then he was not allowed to share his story. Like, doesn't he act like a kid would act if that was what happened? So some more things that are very, very weird that happened with this crime. First one, the ransom note, which I'll get into in a second. The second thing that is, I think, immediate red flag that they were awake, they did not go to sleep that night, is that Patsy was wearing the exact same clothes that she was wearing the night before when the police came. So you're telling me, really quickly, based off of their story, that she went to the Christmas party, came home, changed, went to bed, woke up, got ready at 5 a.m. in the exact same outfit, clothes, and makeup that she was wearing the night before to the Christmas party. She put on those clothes, those party clothes, those dirty party clothes. When she's rich, has a bunch of clothes, being a socialite's a thing, wearing the same outfit twice is definitely not a thing. It's like, who does that? So that pretty much confirms that she was awake that night. They spent the night awake covering it up, and she never thought to be smart and put on clothes, put on new clothes. Now, it's like shocking. I feel like I want to look at their Mercury really quick. Patsy and JONBENET's Mercury. They feel really haphazard, do they not? They feel like they definitely are the opposite of the family that crosses their T's and dots their I's. Like, just a little scatterbrained. Like, if they are trying to cover this up, they didn't really cover it up that well. So her Mercury is in Capricorn, so that makes sense in the way that she speaks in like interviews that you watch her in. Now, what I see more with her Mercury in Capricorn and how it translates is that she can be a little bit dry during interviews. You know, she is emotional, but also she's not really that emotional, the way she expresses herself, the way she speaks. She doesn't really seem like she speaks from a place of, from her heart. You know, it just kind of seems that she's trying to speak from a place of more of like, you know, what she was groomed into saying, what she was told to say, what's appropriate to say, which is very Capricorn Mercury. And then if you look at her aspects, she does have some sketchier aspects to her Mercury. We have Mercury trine Jupiter. I think that she probably talks a lot and she has a lot to say. And sometimes she might say the wrong thing and get too overzealous and not really planning ahead, just kind of going with it, right? I don't think that they planned the cover up that well. Mercury square Neptune, I think this is indicative of a liar. Now, it's not indicative of a, again, liar, liar, pants on fire. I see it more as the liar that doesn't know what the truth is. Like, I think that she has distorted herself so much into skirting responsibility, into pretending it wasn't happening. It's like a story happened a certain way, but it's almost like they know what happened, but then they'll rewrite it in their head. You know, it's like, well, if you just keep telling yourself that, then it'll be true. That's how I kind of see this Mercury square Neptune aspect. It's like she's not only disillusioning everyone else and everyone outside of the investigation of what happened, but I think she also has genuinely disillusioned herself into what happened in order to like skirt responsibility, which is very Neptunian. Her Mercury says that she coped. She was trying to cope with what happened, pretend she wasn't a part of it, skirt responsibility, cover her ass. Now his Mercury's in Sagittarius. I was immediately like, this guy's a fucking liar. I mean, I'm so sorry. I really like Sagittarius energy, but the placement that I think it's the most, I guess problematic, I'll say, is Mercury. One of the more negative traits of Sagittarius is the fact that they can over-exaggerate the truth, bend the truth. That's very like how Sagittarius kind of lies. Like, I wasn't lying. I really thought I was going to be writing in 10 minutes, but it's like, you obviously weren't going to be writing in 10 minutes, right? He has his Mercury also square Neptune. So all those themes again apply here, but honestly even more because it's in Sagittarius, especially because his Neptune is in Libra. You just, oh, this is the Christian way to go about things. So this was still Christian because of this. I think they both have a little bit of that. Like, we're still Christian because of this, or this is how you go about things when you're Christian, and we're in denial of this and we've repented. Like, I think that can totally be their theme. Mercury sextile Venus. He only wants to talk when he has something pleasant to say. And then Mercury opposite Saturn. I mean, his Saturn's in his 10th house. He can't tell the truth, right? The truth is the Saturn in the 10th house. The lie is the Mercury in Sagittarius, right? So he's trying to come across very professional. He's trying to come across like a businessman, like a respectable businessman that just found himself in this horrible situation, when in reality it was his mind and himself, you know, that opposition that was the one that got himself into that position in the first place. Also with Mercury opposite Saturn, you're just not going to say much. He doesn't talk much in his interviews. He doesn't say much. He also has that Capricornian quality to him where it's like everything has to be filtered and written out and planned first before it's said. Like, you know, I'm a Capricorn Mercury and I have a note on my bullet points for this video. Lastly, the sketchy thing before we get on to the ransom note is that it was more than 4 months after the body was found that they submitted for the first time to have separate formal interviews at the Boulder County Justice Center. You can do a lot, cover a lot, plan a lot, strategize together a lot in 4 months. So obviously that's bullshit. Whatever it is, I think the Boulder police system obviously has something to do with it. They obviously had something to do with it, and they're in on it together so that they can have this clean little perfect interview that's tied up in a bow. Again, Saturn in the 10th house for JONBENET and Capricorn Sun for Patsy. Very planned, very strategic, very much in with the big wigs. I need to get some of this Capricorn energy in with me. I don't know anyone. No one will save my ass. I'm just kidding. I'm not doing anything, but okay, let's finally get into this ransom note. So this ransom note is like the #1 piece of evidence, basically. It's a long handwritten note that was found, again, discovered at the base of the stairs. It was considered the kind of trigger point for finding out that, you know, JONBENET was kidnapped, and it's what made Patsy Ramsey call the police. So Patsy claims in a statement given to the authorities in 1996 that it wasn't until she found the ransom note that she knew her daughter was either gone or dead. What's weird is that the note demanded a very specific amount of money, and that's $118,000, which is nearly an identical amount to the amount that John had made that year for his Christmas bonus. Why wouldn't they just say $100,000, right? Unless they're like, I don't know, they're just dumb. They're just not thinking. It's almost like they have Mercury squared Neptune, and they don't really like think that much in a calculated long-term sense. The ransom note was unusually long. The FBI states that it's really rare for criminals to have such a long time to write the note. There have been multiple people like trying this out online and and it's even like been proven that it takes at least, and that's if you know every word and you're writing at a quick pace and you're not stopping, 15 minutes to write this note, which is a long time to sit down and write a note. And it's also weird because the paper and the pen used to write the note was the notepad and pen that's in the Ramsey household that they use. There have been a lot of handwriting experts that look at this note and say that they think that it was written by Patsy Ramsey. Now, the Ramseys have stated like, oh, we've hired our own, interesting, our own people to like look over the note, and they've said that it's just 4.5 out of 5 chance that it's not her. It's like, okay, well, that's what your money says. So what did the police say? The police say that they think it's her. You know, the police obviously believe the note was staged. It did not have any fingerprints on it except for Patsy's and the authorities who handled it. Okay, so there's not any random DNA on this. So it's like at that point, who else would have written it other than Patsy? And she is a Capricorn sun. She is a Capricorn Mercury. I think if anybody's going to take the initiative to try to cover this up, it's going to be the Capricorn sun and Capricorn Mercury. And also, how Capricorn is it to have a really, really long, rambly ransom note and just go on and on about something that you don't need to just go on and on about. So now that we have the information on the case and what happened the night of, let's look at the birth chart of the case. I have here the exact time of the police call. Now, this is obviously not the exact time of the murder, but this is the night of. We'll look at the chart, the aspects. The first thing that I see is all these Capricorn and Aquarius planets opposing, strongly opposing this Cancer moon. So how I see this is Capricorn Sun and Capricorn Mercury, Capricorn Jupiter, Aquarius, Neptune, and Uranus. These are strategic planets. These are planets all about gaining respect, gaining status, rising your way up through the ranks. Okay? Capricorn and Aquarius are very honest in the way that, you know, they're not shrouded around by emotions. They're just to the point. There's some level of a business like transaction involved here. Things being planned, things being prepared. And then this Cancer moon opposing everything. This Cancer moon is the heart, the emotions. It's sensitive. It's defensive. It has walls up. It's not planned. It's not about rising through the ranks. It's about experiencing itself and living within the family and being a part of a family. It has nothing to do with gaining money and gaining prestige. It wants to just gain the heart and the home. So how I read this is this juxtaposition between what the family wants, what benefits the family, what works best for the family, versus what's best for the kids emotionally, right? What's best for the family and, you know, our prestige and our life is being a part of this child SA ring. What's awful to that is the opposing Cancer moon. It's hurting her. It's very painful for the kids. It's a very emotionally splitting, taxing experience. Also, you could look at this as this really tight family unit being split, being exposed, being ripped out at the seams, right? Also, there's probably a lot of back and forth, right? Do we do this? Do we cover this up? Do we go for this? Are we honest? Are we honest and are we expose ourselves, Cancer moon? Or do we just tell people and show people what they want to see? Aquarius, Capricorn, what we want them to see. You see this really, really strong Mars opposition to Saturn. Mars in Virgo, Saturn in Aries. Saturn in Aries is definitely a time where you could mess up and hurt somebody really badly, accidentally, randomly, without meaning to, right? Maybe Mars in Virgo, you were trying to be very strategic. You were trying to be very careful. You were trying to think things out, I guess, but you didn't. Letting your passions overtake you. Authority says one thing, but what actually happened is another. Mars opposite Saturn, right? And then also there's this Venus in Sagittarius conjunct Pluto. Venus conjunct Pluto, you know, being more attracted to the people that you shouldn't be attracted to. And then Venus in Sagittarius. There's just a lot of spontaneity, a lot of going for it, a lot of why not but try this? Why not but do that? There was a lot of objects and items used instead. I think actually Mars and Virgo can denote sexual inadequacy, unable to perform sexually, especially with opposite Saturn, especially with an opposite sun. Saturn and Aries also has a lot to do with like ego. You know, not being able to perform will make you upset. That'll make you more volatile. That'll make you more likely to do worse things, right? So also now if we're looking at this chart with the time and place as though it's like the police call, right? Moon in Cancer in the 8th house, they're hiding the fact that they know that their child is already dead or injured. They're lying about it. They're strategizing on top of it with all that opposition. Sagittarius rising, they're calling the police. You know, they're acting as though they're upset. They're acting as though they're emotional, but it's fake. All this moon opposition with Cancer, they're putting on all these things. They're being defensive. They're pretending, right? Sagittarius rising, they're impulsive. They're trying to have this big emotional expression on the phone, right? Sun in Capricorn in the 1st house. These are distinguished people. This is a distinguished family that's calling. However, it's square all this stuff. They're lying. They're not telling the truth about what happened. It's square Mars. They're not telling the truth about what happened physically that night. It's square Saturn. They're not telling the truth about what risks they took themselves that night to put themselves in this situation and to put their child in this situation. They have all this stuff in the 2nd house. This is a cover-up for people financially. This is a cover-up for the bigwigs. This, I feel like, points so obviously to money plus children equals sexual assault ring. Planets in Capricorn and Aquarius in the 2nd house opposing Cancer moon in the 8th house. I don't know how else to spell it out. Mars in the 9th house conjunct the midheaven. Oh my God, I just noticed it was intercepted. So it's like they weren't the actual ones that did the deed, right? They're having to deal with the after effects of their actions. Yes, but it's not their actions. It's somebody else's actions. That's very Mars intercepted. What did I do to deserve this? Bitch, you know what you did to deserve this. And then, come on, Pluto in the 12th house, fucking little liars. Venus in the 12th house, that is the ultimate just like, you know, power imbalance kind of situation within there. If you have any thoughts about this chart, let me know in the comments. I actually would love to hear other people dissect this chart as well. Now let's go to after the crime. So Boulder police initially focused on Patsy and John Ramsey, but by October 1997, they actually had over 1,600 people in their persons of interest index. However, I would say for the most part, pretty much the Boulder police concentrated on Patsy and John Ramsey, which I am glad they did, but I really do feel like they did in the wrong way. Also, what's sketchy is the Ramseys' first interview was with CNN and not the police. They actually, as I mentioned, they resisted the police interviews for 4 months. And everyone said that Patsy looked weird and drugged up and that JONBENET was like the Ice King. So both make sense with their charts, right? Also it makes sense with his 10th house stuff that JONBENET would choose to have a public interview first rather than with the police. Patsy, you know, they said that she seemed drugged up, which I think she might have been. Mercury square Neptune. And people don't talk about how much Capricorns like drugs, but Capricorns really like drugs. Capricorns really like medication. And obviously with all that Sagittarius, it's going to be hard for her to say no. They also might have done it as like a form of control so that they could control more of what she said and not have her say things or respond emotionally in a way that they didn't want her to, which is very much the experience of being like a Capricorn female. Basically, this case was so fucked up because there were just so many errors that were made upon the initial investigation, as I mentioned, that it's like finding evidence and finding good evidence and reliable evidence and informations and all that sort of stuff. It became nearly impossible. It became so hard to investigate this case at all. You know, they could have gotten all those names from the Christmas party, investigated those people, but they just didn't really seem to feel like it. Or, you know, maybe get notice of all the people that were walking in and out of the house and contaminating the evidence, but meh. Before I go into the theories, I want to just go over some stuff really quickly that did not come up until much after the case. In 2003, which is quite some time after the case, trace DNA that was taken from the victim's clothes was found to belong to an unknown male that did not match the DNA of any of the family. So basically what that means is that somebody touched her clothes, right? All over her, there were like 6 spots all over her clothes that a random guy touched that we don't know who it is. So in 2006, Patsy Ramsey actually passes of ovarian cancer. And I'm also pretty sure that by this point, Patsy and JonBenét are not together, which is interesting and makes sense because JonBenét Ramsey is a full moon baby. So that's basically the case, okay? It all basically occurs within that one day. Here are the theories. They're basically 2 theories, and you kind of know what they are. The intruder theory and then the, family theory. So basically, the intruder theory says that an intruder did this, as I kind of went over. However, there is no forced entry, but the police and prosecutors did find an unidentified boot mark in the basement where her body was found. They found like an attaché case that didn't belong to the family. There are some persons of interest, and that's not really what I want to go over. I didn't really care to go over the persons of interest in this video, just because I really don't think it's any of them. There was this one neighbor who like played Santa Claus that people suspected it could be him, and he's creepy. They all sound creepy, they all sound weird, but I think they're all just trying to piggyback on, the fame and the infamy of this JonBenét case. They're all just like these unknown, creepy, random, weird guys that are pedophiles. I think it's a rich guy that is very well known in the community that we could never expose, right? And then there's obviously the theory of each of the different family members. I would say most people that think it's the family think that it's the dad. They think that, he got mad and something happened and he murdered her. Some people think that it's Patsy because, JonBenét had these bedwetting issues and in a fit of rage, maybe Patsy murdered their daughter. People also think that Burke did it and that he accidentally hit her over the head with a flashlight and that's what caused the broken skull. However, that still doesn't answer all the sexual abuse stuff that was evidently there. That still doesn't answer the unidentified DNA. That still doesn't answer a lot of things, I think. So now my theory, which is the right theory. No, I'm just kidding. I think is the right theory. So author Stephen Singular, I don't know, in his book called Presumed Guilty, talks about how JonBenét attracted the attention of child pornographers and pedophiles affiliated with a pageant scene. Again, this is my theory that they were a part of a sexual assault ring. Whatever that is contained in. Obviously, I don't know the intricacies, and I don't want to know the intricacies, but that's what I think happened. I think that both John and Patsy allowed both their kids to be sexually assaulted by multiple people, to get paid for it, to get social standing for it, for whatever it is, to benefit pageant-wise, to benefit in the community, whatever it might be, because they're being blackmailed. Who knows? And she's a little girl. They went too far, they hurt her too bad, and then they had to either kill her or they had already accidentally killed her. And then they dropped her back off with the Ramseys, and then the Ramseys kind of had to figure out how to cover it up from there. JonBenét Ramsey was taken to the pediatrician 27 times in 3 years. And she's 6. She passed at 6. And 5 times, 5 of those times were for vaginitis, which is insane to get as a kid. Also, 2 days before she was killed, a 911 call was made from the Ramsey home. The call ended before anything was able to be said to dispatch, and after many failed attempts to reconnect and re-reach the family, the police just went over there because they were worried. And basically, Patsy denied anything ever happened. She claimed the call was a mistake. Really suspicious that the police were called a few days before. Really suspicious that there was a known injury to her hymen that had only healed the day before. It's almost like something had almost happened to her before, but they were not ready to call yet. It's almost like she had almost been murdered and they said, oh no, she wasn't yet. We'll just keep going with it. And also, why would you write a ransom note for somebody that you already murdered? Right? There's this picture, this really, really, really incriminating picture of JonBenét Ramsey, and in the background is what looks like to be Ghislaine Maxwell. And there's a lot of known information that Ramsey, JonBenét Ramsey, and Jeffrey Epstein ran in the same circles. Epstein's partner, Ghislaine Maxwell, who we think is seen in this picture with JonBenét Ramsey, used the same attorney and the same law firm that the Ramseys did when they were dealing with their case. Bing, bing, bing. I feel like that's all I need, right? Like, just what lawyer did they choose? That will tell you how guilty they are. Oh, they chose Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyer? guilty. So basically, in conclusion, my theory is the only theory that fucking makes sense. So let's go now to conclude this very long video, but thank you so much for being here. Let's just take a look, because I feel like I've looked at everybody else's chart except for really looking at JONBENET Ramsey's chart. Now, the first thing that I want to say is notice how this video is titled JONBENET Ramsey, but the time that I actually spent talking about JONBENET Ramsey is pretty minimal. It's so minimal that I felt like at the end, something I haven't done, I had to go back and talk about her chart a little bit more, because I just didn't need to talk about it that much throughout the situation because it had so much to do with everyone else. If that little summary of what I just said doesn't perfectly explain a Leo sun opposite Aquarius moon, I mean, I don't know what does. Aquarius moon, she's a cult figure. This is a cult case. It's a known case. Her name is bigger than her. Very Aquarius moon conjunct the midheaven. In the 9th house, it's something for more fun. It's not something businessy. She's known for pageantry, something more showy, something more Sagittarius. But it's an Aquarius moon. So it's like the real people we talk about in her murder is the cast of characters. It's not her. It's about her, Leo sun in the 4th house, but we don't know anything about her. We don't know the ins and outs of her personality. Aquarius moon, badly aspected. Aquarius moon, square Pluto. This isn't about her, it's about her murder. So the grand trine in Earth, I think, is just that she had a very established family. She was very well taken care of. She had everything tied up into a bow. She had all the stability and all the support she could need. Whatever she wanted, she was probably able to get. You know, she got a big dollhouse for Christmas, you know, big home, all that sort of stuff. Lots of money, both parents, a sibling, cute clothes, cute story, cute life, all that sort of stuff. However, it was working simultaneously with this fixed grand cross. It incorporates her sun and moon, her Pluto and her Mars. Like, those are what's crossing. Her and her sexuality. And it doesn't have to do with her actual sexuality, though, because she's 6. She doesn't know what her sexuality is. She doesn't know what the fuck that means, which makes sense. It's intercepted these planets. She doesn't know what these things mean. She wasn't able to take them on, right? They're being taken away from her immediately. Pluto in the 6th house already denotes abuse day to day. Day in, day out, there's abuse. What kind of abuse? Well, it's opposite her Mars, probably sexual abuse. Her Mars is intercepted. It's in the 12th house. She's not able to stand up for herself. She has a huge personality, Leo sun. She is kind of more of a figurehead, Aquarius moon. She was taken away from us in a mystery at the age of 6, intercepted Pluto, and it's a big question. It's a big, aggressive murder question, and it might have to do with something sexual. Mars in the 12th house and Taurus intercepted, right? And then with Saturn in the 9th house, it's almost like her problem was that she was given so much. Her problem was that she was exposed too much to these big people, Saturn in Capricorn. And then with her 8th house, she has Neptune and Uranus. So Uranus, very weird occurrence, random occurrence. Also unsolved mystery. The first person when I think of Uranus in the 8th house, other than myself, that comes to mind is Natalie Wood. Is the murder of Natalie Wood. There is a big question around what happened with Natalie Wood. She has Uranus in the 8th house. We do not know how she passed. Oh, I should do her now that I'm actually thinking about it. Both those murders took place in very similar spheres in the fact that it's a cold case, an unsolved murder, but it was also very haphazardly taken care of, very chaotic the day of, lots of weird ins and outs, lots of weird mysteries. Very Uranus. Now, she also has Neptune in the 8th house. So also, maybe there's some substances involved. Lord knows. With Neptune in the 8th house, Neptune in the 8th house is, I think, a little bit of a scary placement. I don't have this natally, but when I was going through my Neptune in the 8th house, I was very fearful of the unknown. You can be very scared of intruders and questionable people and things creeping up in the middle of the night. Like, we don't think of Neptune in the 8th house as like, scary, but there's something very unnerving about it. It's like, what's real, what's not? Am I in harm's way? Do I like the fact that I'm in harm's way? Do I feel safer and more comfortable always being in harm's way because that's what I've been conditioned to know? It's just like there's a lot of mysteries, a lot of questions. You're rarely told the truth with Neptune in the 8th house. She might have been almost kept hidden from a lot of the stuff that she went through. She just might have been very disconnected from herself and used that as a coping mechanism. Also, I mean, 8th house planets just equals a lot of inheritance and a lot of money as well. She would have gotten that if she grew up, but she didn't. With somebody's chart like this, yes, she's a Leo sun, Aquarius moon, Gemini rising. These are pageantry placements. These are fun, big, bright, bold, happy, enjoyable, energetic placements. But with her 6th house and her 12th house, there are a lot of nefarious, a lot of questionable, a lot of, dare I say, evil things that were probably going on beneath the surface. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Maybe it taught you something that you didn't know about the case. I would love to know your thoughts about it, your thoughts about her chart. Don't forget, I sell full-length birth chart readings on my website, shainaemily.com. I have an astrology TikTok, and I have a personal Instagram. All right, thank you guys so much for watching. Bye.